Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Good. How are you on time, Aron? Do you have a little more time to get into shelters and sleeping bags?
Oh, man, I got all the time in the world. The only thing I got going on is I got all my gear laid out so I can get Google Tweetspace famous more. Just unloaded it all as we were talking so I can, one, make sure I didn't forget any shit, and then two, kind of do a pan video on my story because guys always have questions about what kit I'm taking. And so, yeah, man, the only thing I got going on is tomorrow I'm going to shoot 3Ds in the morning before we go out scouting. So ask away. Cool.
Yeah, so I think we covered pretty good into packs there. So to get into shelters a little bit, Kifaru sells the teepee style, and I know that you use a bunch of different varieties, but for someone because if you ask specifically what tent should I use, that's asking the same thing as what pack should I use. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios, but if you're thinking of a guy that's going to go out, he's heading from the east, going out west for a September elk hunt in Colorado or Montana or one of the kind of main states there, what kind of advice do you have from a shelter standpoint?
Gotcha. So the first thing, though, is let's say this is all, related to backpack hunting, as far as as far as the advice I'm giving. Mm-hmm. Hold on 1 second. We have a battery crisis. For the big camera? I'm charging them now. I'm on it, man. Frank and I are packing. Frank's a little bit better about packing earlier than I am. Frank will pack the night before season without a doubt, or the night before we go. So anyway, this info is just for backpack hunting. If you're going to car camp, get whatever, but this is for, carrying it on your back. That you're going to look at the time of year, like the earlier you go, the more you can get away with. Even up high in Colorado above tree line, you can get away with more, late August, early September. But I usually, if the later you get and the colder it gets, the more I'm going to sway someone into bringing a stove with one of our TP systems, just for the simple fact of, fire is life. That is key. And staying warm and drying your clothing out is, it's at a level that it can't even really be. Once someone has done that and gotten used to running a teepee with a stove, you don't go back. It is difficult. But if you don't have wood to burn, you're up above tree line, then you want to look into more of a 3 or 4 season tent. If you're wanting to be mobile and go lightweight, you probably want to do a tarp and a bivy or just a tarp. So you've got a lot of different, variables. And again, I'll just run through them. You've got the hardcore guy that'll just run a bivy. And I strongly suggest never do that because it sucks. And then you got a bivy and a tarp, or you have just a tarp and a ground cloth. And then you run into the closed floorless shelters like the teepees or our sawtooth is one we offer, super tarp or whatever. And then you have like a 3-season tent. I'm being very general here, which is a tent that the outer shell does not go to the ground. It's usually 3 to 5 inches off the ground. And then the sides of that 3-season tent are mesh on the inner wall. And then you'll have a 4-season tent that the sidewalls go all the way to the ground, and it's a uncoated or unwaterproof material that makes up the sidewalls, then it'll retain more heat. With all those different options, you kind of need to, one, assess, is there going to be a lot of mosquitoes? If there's going to be so many mosquitoes like in British Columbia, you may want a more closed-in shelter. Is it going to be, are you packing in 8-9 miles? Well, if you're packing in a long ways, you want to go with the lightest shelter you can get away with. You may want to get a tarp. If you're going to be above tree line with absolutely no way to build a fire, high winds, potential snow, you're going to want to go with a 4-season shelter. If you're going to be hunting later in the season or in really wet conditions, you probably want to go with a floorless shelter and a stove to dry everything out. And so, man, it's so dependent upon the situation. it's hard to say for people to buy just one if they're hunting a lot, which you've probably found out. Like, you can get pretty close with one, but to be the most efficient, you generally need a couple different shelter options. I'll give you an example. I'm looking at my pile of gear now that's going back in my pack. I'm running a Big Agnes 3-wire bivy and a super tarp, or a paratarp, excuse me. Paratarp's a fairly small shelter. I'm doing that because, one, we're going in 9 miles. 2, we're gaining 4,500 feet in elevation. 3, there's a very good chance each night I'm going to be sleeping in a deer bed in a very shitty position on the side of a cliff that I just don't have the room to set up a tent. Number 4, I want to be extremely mobile. And if let's say as we're scouting, we want to leave some weight, some of our stuff more towards the way we're coming back out,
Yeah.
I'll drop I'll drop the tarp and just take the bivy, or leave the bivy and just take the tarp to do a quick one-nighter quite a ways away, where if you're taking a tent, you're kind of forced to take the whole damn tent. So I'm bouncing all over the place here, but there's a lot of variables in there. So I would definitely say kind of assess the situation, time of year, elevation, physical ability, how far you're going, and make your decision from that.
Yeah, so that
probably confused people more than when we started.
Well, no, I think you broke it down pretty good. I mean, you started with, you have the bivy, and then you have bivy, tarp, teepee, and then your 3 or 4 season tent that you could potentially have there. And I think you covered that pretty well. But so what you were saying, one point that I want to dig into is you said, not one covers all. And that's kind of what I've learned. Right now I'm running a teepee and a stove setup, which, like, I agree with you. I don't know if I could ever go back to not having a stove. It is awesome. I did learn a lot about using a stove. I had a lot of negative condensation. I guess you could even get into that. That wasn't the word I was trying to use, but I did have a lot of condensation problems at first. And what I learned was it was the way I had the tent set up and my inexperience with it, with airflow. And also in Colorado's crazy rain, wind, and sleet storms that happen, it seems like every night in the high country. But
yeah.
And so anyways, I took a teepee out last year to Colorado, and I was camped around 11,000 feet, and it was just below tree line. I was probably 100 yards from tree line. And the one thing you definitely got to consider with a teepee is when you start getting up there and you're getting on some of those knife ridges and everything, it is difficult to find a flat spot for it. But so anyways, once I did find a relatively flat spot and get it all set up there, I did also learn to put rocks on top of your stakes,
yeah, that's vital.
So I wasn't used to that kind of wind, in Pennsylvania or anything, but middle of the night had a really bad storm that started pulling out my stakes, and I thought I was going to lose the entire shelter. And so that was a vital lesson to learn. And also I picked up some of those MSR stakes that kind of have I don't even know what they're called, but they kind of screw into the ground a little bit more. And
yeah, they twist. Those things they're badass.
Yeah, they are awesome. I feel like those could hold up to just about anything. I just run 4 of those and then use the regular stakes. But anyways, that was something I noticed. But running a stove, so I had a stove in the teepee with my dad and I in there, and being able to come back and lay in there and just turn it on just to heat up and dry all your stuff was awesome. It was, I can't say enough about how nice that was. But I don't know what you can say about this, but if I noticed when I was running that tent in Pennsylvania, when it was really cold out and I was burning nothing but softwood, that I had an issue with the stove plugging up. And really bad. And smoking me out of the tent basically while I was sleeping.
Smoke you out of the tent and kill you if you're not careful.
Yeah, luckily my brother was there and he woke me up because I could sleep through anything. And it was really bad. So that's definitely something to note. And do you have any, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but before almost for my own knowledge here as well as anybody else, is there a good way of making sure that doesn't happen, or just keeping the damper wide open?
The dampener will help, but also if you, when you're, if you, in Barker, when I talked about this, and it was probably hard to tell, we were talking about, stoves too, but, burning, starting a fire, burning it in a wood stove as well. But if you can get the fire going with whatever dry wood is around you, and then stack the wet wood around the stove underneath it, even though a lot of people tell you not to, whatever you can to dry that out. And then you're, kind of bridging up, taking the driest wood and throwing it in there while the other stuff's drying out. And then obviously the spark arrestor, you may need to pull that spark arrestor to where there's a little bit of a gap in there where maybe it's not plugging the entire the entire stove hole. You can get some embers coming out of that, possibly, but it's worthwhile to know that, because once that spark arrestor gets completely plugged, which is easy to do, it's not necessarily just wet wood, it's the type of wood. That's when it'll become a problem. And definitely, before you go to bed, if you get it just rip-roaring like I do, pull the spark arrestor out, tap it, clean it completely, put it back in, because the chance of that plug-in while you're falling asleep are pretty slim, because it's only going to burn for, 30, 40 minutes.
Is that something you can
make sure this?
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is that something that on your stoves? I don't own a Kifaru stove, but is that something that you can pull out the spark arrestor while, or how are you're explaining about taking it out?
Yeah. Do you have a seek outside?
Yes. Yep.
So on the seek outside, it's got and I don't give a shit. You can mention whatever you want. Mm-hmm. It's got like a twisty flue thing.
Yeah.
Like where you twist the dampener. Ours don't. We have a metal screen that goes across the stovepipe, and so you are screwed. You can't do what I was talking about.
Okay.
With ours, you can pull the screen out completely, halfway out, tap the screen, clean it, but you can adjust that where it won't plug. Is like you can on other stoves. And Seek Outside makes good products. Excuse me. We with us, I mean, keep in mind, Patrick, pioneered this in the spirit of, I say this all the time, my buddies give me shit, but the spirit of total candor. Patrick, he pioneered the backpackable, the stoves and the teepees. To my knowledge, he was the first to do it. And when you're the first to do it, he kind of, he would probably agree with me. He also might smack me for saying this. He rested on his laurels because he was the only game in town. And there was other companies that started, and like Seek Outside being one of them, and they took the stove design. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and get beat up either. We're obviously trying to design something even lighter and better, but they made box, we're stainless steel, super durable, and that was something Patrick really focused on. But this ultra lightweight kind of thing going on, they made an ultralight titanium box stove, which basically like ours with some changes, made it a titanium. It's a good stove. But there's certain things they did that Patrick kind of always, pounded in my mind. This is one of the problems you're talking about not to do. And so there's certain things on different stoves. It's not like ours is all that in a bag of chips. Ours has got things that needs to change on it too. But you need to learn those so you don't get yourself in any sticky situations. Like in the case of ours, that screen can plug up. It's not like it's infallible. And once that plugs up, same thing. You can't see from one end of the shelter to the other when it gets smoky. Yeah. So those are the things, that you can look at. But the wood, I'm not what's the word? What's a tree dog? What's a guy? What tells the word for somebody in there? Arborist?
Oh.
And yeah, arborist, forester. I'm not an arborist. I don't know all the different trees and woods, but there's certain woods that are going to plug that stove up super fast.
Like the
And
pines
there's
and
other
hemlocks and
woods.
everything.
Yeah, yeah. And then you look at, like, let's say an aspen tree, which is horrible for efficiency because it burns so fast when it's dead. But I'm lazy, and Patrick gives me crap all the time because I burn aspen trees constantly, like dead branches. They're horribly inefficient. They burn super hot and they burn super fast, so the stove won't maintain its heat. But when you're like me, I just burn the shit out of that thing constantly. I feed it like I feed myself. I'm just cramming wood in there because you guys give me crap all the time. It'll be Brokeback Mountain in that shelter. You'll be in your underwear. I get it hot. I like being warm in that thing. And so if I am going to burn different wood or wet wood, I will put that around it as I'm burning, the aspens to dry that other stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed with burning softwood, when I mean, pines or hemlock type trees that we have a lot in Pennsylvania, and even in Colorado, I burned a lot of that. But it burns really fast too, and it'll get super hot, but you run out quickly. But in this case, when it was just so cold,
20 minutes.
it gelled up, and and unplugged it, and it was. I mean, I took a picture of once the smoke kind of cleared, how hot the whole titanium stove and stovepipe got. It was glowing red from the front all the way up through the roof. I mean, it was kind of scary how bad it got. So let's put it this way: the rest of that night wasn't very good sleeping in it. When I had the doors wide open and stove wasn't really doing much for you at that point. But it's a lesson learned,
Yeah, I was going to say, having the everything wide open to get that flow going, get that air flowing from front to back, because it's really it's all about airflow with a stove, especially one that small, as far as getting air to flow to get, because the fire, it needs oxygen, and getting the oxygen through that on a steady flow is the key to victory. And it's easy in Colorado. I'll be the first guy to admit, you can start a forest fire here. Like, it's not very difficult to build a fire here. You go to northern Idaho, you got crisis level situation going on. Like, you've got to focus to keep that fire going. So
that's what I thought was funny when the first time I got to Colorado there. I was like, it would rain, it would storm, it would sleet, it would snow, and then you could still kick up dust. I was like, what the? This is weird. Everything was so dry all the time. You could just snap sticks like it was nothing. Where I'm used to a little bit more wetter, stuff a little bit harder to get started. But that was also nice at the same time to be able to do that. And I didn't have any problems with the stove in Colorado. I mean, it worked pretty flawlessly. But so anyways, I was looking at, so this year I'm going out to Colorado again. I'm going out for 2 weeks, and at least one of the weeks I'm going by myself. So I'm not probably going to carry a stove and a shelter, as far as I'm not going to carry the teepee and the shelter. And I was looking at, a tarp / bivy setup, or if I wanted to just go with a lightweight, 3-season tent. And from the sounds of it, it's a little bit more versatile to be able to use the tarp bivy setup, because you can use one or the other at different times there.
Yeah, it is, and it depends. I mean, and I'm a huge Hilleberg fan when it comes to shelters, and I have been for a long time. I am not a big fan of 3-season tents from a lot of other companies. Mm-hmm. Not all, but a lot of other ones, because they just don't hold up to some of the shit that we put them through, even in the quote-unquote 3-season time frame.
Yeah.
And so a Hilleberg 3-season tent is closer to a 4-season. And so usually if someone's kind of debating back and forth, on what to use, there's going to be the, if people worry about sleeping on the ground, I don't ever sleep on the ground. I put a piece of Tyvek down. So if I'm using a tarp, there's Tyvek on the ground. So it's not like I'm just throwing my sleeping bag in the dirt and the mud. I mean, I put a piece of Tyvek there. But there's going to be, that sometimes above tree line sucks. It just does. It's windswept and whatever. And down in tree line, the tarp is pretty nice, and you won't have as many issues. And so to me, if you're looking at a like a super mobile ultralight option, let's say from Kifaru, which is like a super tarp, it's a huge tarp. It's I'm trying to think, it's 10 feet long, or even we got a new Aegis shelter, which is a big 10 foot by 10 foot square tarp. You take a 10 foot by 10 foot tarp, you can pitch that thing in many different directions and angles and everything else. And getting weather underneath it is a moot point. It's too big for that to happen. And so if you have that and you're going to be in the timber, that is a great option. It's well under 2 pounds. Again, it's 10 foot by 10 foot. It's giant. And you really won't need a bivy. Just so big and it's lightweight. But then if you're going to be above tree line, to get away from the windswept stuff, a bivy is a good idea because that's going to block the wind. Whether you got a down or synthetic bag, it's going to block the wind. I don't know that there's a wrong answer for that between a 3-season and a tarp bivy combo. I think it's more of a, personal preference on, like if we backpack in there, we're going in, I think it's 9 miles is what we're going in on Sunday. I can tell you right now, if the weather looks halfway decent, I can pitch that bivy in about 45 seconds, and I'm getting in it and going to sleep. And then I'll just take my tarp and wrap it around my gear in case it rains. So just wrap it around my pack and everything, and I'm going to get knocked out and pass out, go to sleep, wake up. If it's still raining the next morning, it's going to kind of suck, but it's Colorado, it doesn't rain that much. I'll stay in the bivy until it stops, and that's where the bivy kind of sucks, where, if I know the weather's going to be bad, I'll pitch the tarp, of course, so I can get out, move around, do whatever I need to do. Whereas you look at a 3 or 4 season tent, let's say a Nalo or a Nyack from, or let's say an Onion or a Nyack, which is a 3-season tent from Hilleberg, I got a little bit more setup time. I got to pay attention a little bit more of where I, put it up because it takes a little bit more room. But, if it's raining and storming out and I'm stuck in the tent, well, it just shifted from a bivy combo. It may not be as good as a 3-season tent where I can move around. But let's say you go in 9 miles and you pack that extra 2 pounds in with shelter weight. The weather's peachy the entire time. You're going to be thinking, why the hell am I carrying this? I just need a tarp or a bivy.
Yeah.
And so that shifts constantly. And I can tell you, people are thinking, oh, that's stupid. I'd always want a 3-season tent. Well, go with us 9 miles in. You'll be pulling your teeth out to save weight when you're gaining 4,500 feet in elevation, gaining and losing 9,000 total just to get there. That's before the party even starts. You just got to the party. And so at that point, that's where you really start to rob Peter to pay Paul. Like, all right, I can go on and on. It is hilarious. It is easy from the armchair or your mom's basement to guess what's going to happen and think But I tell you, Mother Nature kicks you right in the dick with altitude. I mean, it crushes everyone. When you cannot breathe, your lactic acid buildup is just ridiculous. You can't take 10 steps. You are going to reassess your gear when you get home, and I guarantee there's shit coming out of your packing list that you thought you couldn't live without before you went. And so that's the kind of stuff that pushes people to a tarp or a bivy.
Yeah. I've been there.
I'm probably talking too much here, but
no. That's good information.
You're a fit motherfucker. I mean, you're fit. Think about a guy who's not fit.
No, I died.
Think of a guy who did.
When I got on the other side of Denver for the first time and pulled off on one of those rest stops around, 10,000 feet somewhere in there, I stepped out to walk to go take a piss, and I thought I was gonna die. I'm like, this isn't good. This isn't good. And once you start hiking up there, and especially climbing elevation, it sucks at first. So you really want to get rid of, if you can cut some weight on the shelter there, do it.
You did a podcast with I think you said Brian and Jordan.
Yeah.
Brian Paul from Gritty.
Yep.
I think he changed it from Gritty Bowman to Gritty now, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah.
I think what do they call that, rebranding?
Yes. I saw his new logo and everything there.
Yeah. So but Brian looking at Brian, would you think Brian would be like just a monster in the mountains? The dude is fit.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to have a pistol squat, air squat competition with him. They do CrossFit like crazy, but he'll be the first to tell you he got the shit smacked out of him when he got out here. I mean, it was a rude awakening. And Brian is super fit, and he's a hardcore dude. I mean, he'll go, but it is a eye opener when you're back here with altitude. And I'm lucky I'm here all the time, and so you look at it in the sense of, if you're just going in 2 miles and setting up one camp or 3, you could suffer through anything for 3 miles, right? That's, or even if you're moving your camp some, but when you're going in 3 and then you're hunting and you're going in 4, when you blow out the elk, and then another mile 5, and you're gaining and losing elevation, or mule deer, you're stalking every day, right? When I say stalk, meaning you're gaining and losing a few thousand feet every day. Yeah, your gear assessment, your gear, how does Ryan Avery put it? You need to reassess your gear situation, because you have thought about it all season. You've probably bought way more shit than you need. You've packed in way more clothing than you need. You're prepared for the apocalypse. And the one thing that kills you is preparing for the apocalypse. The lightning, what if I cut my leg off, right? And the hacksaws people bring, and all this shit they bring to prepare. That's what kills them. Yeah. That is what gets them, because they're coming off the mountain because they can't pack it all. Where, all these what ifs, which shit can happen when you party naked in the backcountry. I mean, things happen, but you pack all this stuff, and the thing that drives you off the mountain is what's in your pack. You can't handle it. And that's something people don't think about. You come off the mountain quick because you got too much crap in your pack, or foot problems, monkey butt, things that people don't. You know how many guys come off the mountain because of ass crack problems? Dude, I'd say it's 1 out of 10. I mean, when your balls start to rot and sweat, and you get that where you're walking like you're bow-legged.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know anybody that can tough it through that. You're coming off the mountain, and that's, sweat, right? Not prepping, not hiking enough. And then that sweat, obviously, it starts to, grind, I guess you could say, or you get these, rashes or whatever. Nobody put that in their assessment, early, right? And then you'll get guys that pack an entire bottle of monkey butt, that powder.
Yeah.
And then you went the other direction, right? You've got too much monkey butt. You got to there's a happy medium for everything. And I've seen too many squirrels in the last 5 minutes. I'm going all over the place, but there's a lot to think about when you're heading in.
No, that's funny. But when Brian came over to, and was, had struggled a little bit with the elevation there, was there anything that helped with that over time? Which is him living there, I'm guessing, but
well, yeah, training or whatever. But I mean, Brian has told several people, I can be, he told Luke Cadillo, I'm a hard ass, or I can be. Now, and I will say that's probably true at times where, he probably wanted to shoot me. And I can be probably the best guy in the world you'd ever want to hunt with. And I'm probably the worst at times, because I am the guy that when you're not keeping up, I am the guy that says, suck it the fuck up and get those legs working. Let's go. Like I'm not good at, come on, man, you're going to make it, because you entered the race. You better be ready to run, like it, so to speak. Right. And this isn't saying Brian wasn't ready to run. The dude's a hardcore dude, but there are times where, Brian and I would argue about something. He would do what I said not to. He'd come back and be like, how'd that work out, dipshit? And that's me and my that's just my mentality. And, a lot of that's from the military and construction, where all my other buddies just throw rocks at me and tell me to suck it up, and they make fun of me the same way, where I think Brian probably wasn't maybe used to that, because, not say maybe used to that, but meaning hunting above tree line is different. It's different in every way. It's different in physical fitness. It's different in how you stalk. And he fell in love with it immediately. But, there were times or whatever that, I would make fun of him for not keeping up. And he'd make fun of me for not spelling something correctly. The dude's super smart. I mean, we constantly were giving each other crap back and forth. But there are times where I was probably a little bit more of a dick. But it was an eye opener for him, especially coming from Oregon, and it's just different, And again, when it's the first time you've ever hunted above tree line, it'd be like a guy hunted above tree line his whole life and then went and hunted Western Oregon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to get crushed from rain and underbrush. You're going to want to shoot yourself from running into rhododendrons and shit. I mean, it's just different everywhere you go.
Yeah, and just different challenges. Do you think, though, as far as if you had to break it down with two, I guess, workouts I see people doing a lot and myself trying them, I want to get your input on it, from people that do a lot of endurance running versus people that are just putting on a pack with weight in and hiking. What would you think from if any of these would help elevation? Do you have any input on that?
I don't know about maybe elevation other than just training is going to help with that. I will say you are making a grave mistake if you do not train with a pack on. Nothing prepares you for training with having a pack on your back other than doing it. And I can tell you from my fat ass crushing long distance runners with a pack on, and where I shouldn't be. I mean, they're better. They're more equipped to go the distance, but I train constantly with a pack on, and that pack is I guess you could say the equalizer.
Yeah.
That sets you apart. So you definitely, if you need to train, you need to obviously build your, lung capacity up to the best of your ability, but you need to make sure and do it with a pack on, just to get the body used to it. 'Cause it's just, especially your hips. And that was the case with you. I think you said your hips flexors were hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you talked to me, and I'm the one that told you, you just aren't used to carrying it on your hips. You'll get used to it. And that's from carrying crappy packs on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. That first few weeks, when you first start carrying it on your hip bones, you get these knots in your butt cheeks, and you're like, good Lord, what's wrong with this pack? Pack's not touching any part of that.
Yeah.
But it's burning. Well, it's because you're carrying, it's like if you've never done curls, you start curling, you get that muscle knot, that pump in your bicep. Well, you're getting a pump in the butt cheek, and you're just not used to it. So it takes a little while, obviously, to get that, I guess, worked out or whatever, get used to it.
Yeah, like when you go to dry your hair after you do curls for the first time in a while, and they get locked up, you get kind of that feeling in your legs, and that was the first thing I noticed, and it was funny because I'm like, I'm looking at it too far in a technical standpoint, and you're just flat out, you're like, you're out of shape for that, man. You got to practice with it. I'm like, oh, well, that's a wake up call. So, but once you got to do it,
people.
What's that?
You pull the man card out. I piss people off saying that because I have a problem with my sensor. Get it out, just get it out and get it out in the open real quick, and it solves a lot of problems. Or and I've said that to guys where I've been like, yeah, man, you're just out of shape. Well, some guys don't like hearing that shit. They get all kinds of butt hurt about it. Or, I've told guys like they're saying, hey, this pack isn't conforming around my hips correctly. And then they'll tell me their body size. And this is a horrible thing to say, but I'm like, well, dude, you don't have any hips, you're fat. Well, I didn't mean that in a negative way, as though it came out extremely negative.
Well,
I just was hey, man, you have to have a hip bone to wrap around it.
Well, I mean, I can see why they would take that from a negative standpoint, but I know from when you said that to me, I'd rather you tell me it straightforward than try to talk around it and me not figure out what the problem is, So I think most people appreciate it, but some just let their egos get in the way of being able to take any criticism. And
yeah, I mean, that's another thing kind of touching on while we're talking about that is getting wrapped up into the super crazy ultra lightweight side of things. There's do you know who Clay Lancaster is? He's an outfitter up in all over BC, Northwest Territories, Yukon, Mexico.
I just know what
you've been around the block.
Talked about him. That's about it.
So, Clay just got back from a hunt in Alaska and for bear with his wife. And man, he's, I don't think he'd mind me saying this. I'm going to have him on the podcast soon, but he called me and cussed about all the new high-tech gear of clothing. And I guess whatever he brought, it did not go well for him. And he's like, you know what? For another 5 pounds, this was after a 15 to 45 second cussing spree of misery. He's like, for another, whatever it was, 4 to 6 pounds, he's like, my comfort level would have shot up 100% in clothing. And he said, instead, I tried to go as light as I could and just got destroyed, right? Just soaking wet, cold, or whatever. And there's kind of a, that we said on the podcast, the fine line between hard ass and dumbass. There's a fine line between ultralight and being, I hate to say it, but ultra right or whatever. Like, you cross a boundary of lightweight and go and start cutting into comfort, and you need to really watch that line that you don't go too far into the lightweight side where you're not only comfort but durability. And that this isn't just packs, this is everything. I wrote an article for Eastman's a couple years ago called "Don't Chase the Rabbit," and it was "Don't Chase the Ultra Lightweight Rabbit." It was a backpacking trip, is what it was based on. Backpack mule deer hunting trip that I chased the rabbit, did the whole, quilt, alcohol stoves, and most miserable time. And I think it was 6 pounds of pack weight would have kept me on the mountain for an unlimited amount of time. But that 6 pounds I deducted off my pack weight may have helped me on the way in, but it also pushed me back off the mountain. And so people really need to kind of assess that of getting a good, dialed in packing list of what exactly they need, but not crossing that dumbass border of going into too lightweight where they're really risking the hunt and, comfort and everything else.
Yeah. No, that's true. And the one thing you can do is, and the one thing I really, that when anyone asks me about doing that, is just using your gear as much as possible. And I understand that, if we don't live in Colorado or Montana or Idaho or whatever, you can still use it. I mean, like the Appalachian Mountains that run the whole way up the East Coast are, for the most part, unless you're, living in the center of the Midwest, are within a few hour drive. And you can go on backpacking trips on the weekend if you take your family or your girlfriend or your wife or whatever it may be. You can practice with, and every trip I go on, I learn something new about, my gear, my equipment, how it works. You're always, fiddling around with stuff and changing things out and figuring out what your creature comforts are and then what your necessities are as well. And I think that's just the biggest thing.
Well, you think about, let's take sleeping bags. Down or synthetic both have their space and place in the outdoors. But you take a good, we'll use down. A good down sleeping bag, a good one, not a great one, but a good one. A 15-degree down bag is going to probably be 2 pounds 8 ounces, roughly. Maybe 3 pounds. Up to 3 pounds 4 ounces for getting into the crappy side of down, and this has to do with whether it's 650 or 850 fill. But anyway, okay, so you take that, it's going to be about $100 an ounce to drop that weight, roughly. Meaning, if I want to, when you first start going lightweight, it's going to be about $100 a pound. When you're starting to lighten your gear, and then when you get really light, it's going to be about $100 an ounce. To keep dropping the weight of your pack. If you're 40 pounds overweight and you spend $800 on a sleeping bag to save a few ounces, you may have been better off buying a gym membership, because 40 pounds on your body, you need to lose it anyway. But truly, this is coming from a guy who was a fat kid. And that's why I don't mind probably saying fat a little bit, fat shaming more than I should, because if I wouldn't have got fat shamed, I'd still be fat. Truly, if you think about it, grab a 40-pound weight and carry it around all day. If you can lose that off of your body, man, that is, I mean, I cannot tell you how much that's saving your joints, your knees, and everything else. It's beneficial for you lifelong. focus on that part too, rather than trying to drop 4, 6, 8 pounds or 4, 6, 8 ounces out of your pack. That fitness portion is not to be overlooked. I mean, you definitely want to stay as fit as you can if you're going to backpack hunt. Again, I know tons of my buddies, lots of fat dudes that kill shit, bigger shit than I do. But a lot of them aren't backpack hunting. If you're going to backpack hunt, you definitely want to put fitness out there as, pretty important as well. Yes. Frank said hello. Brian.
But
sorry.
No, you're good.
Garbage away.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. And the one thing that I learned too is from like when the first year when I went out there, and I thought I was in pretty good shape, but I struggled quite a bit. And yeah, did I get through the hunt? Yeah, I went through it fine. And the second year, I geared my training a lot more with pack training, and also, and one thing that helped me a lot, I don't know, again, you do it way more than me, but just me personally was when I would do some different workouts, I would do step ups since I couldn't always get to some place where I'm doing, climbing up the mountain or anything. So I'd put weight in my pack and do step ups, and then I would sprint in between sets. And what the sprinting helped me with, it seemed like, was when I was out there and I'd hear a bugle and I would run, that's where I was struggling. I was like, I had the endurance to go for a while, but I didn't have that quick, twitch, I guess, to be able to take off if I needed to after a bugle or whatever the case may be there. But that was a huge thing for me is when I was in college, and then even after, I was big into lifting weights and everything. And once I started doing some backpack style hunting and everything, I realized that extra body weight up top isn't doing you any good, and kind of quit a lot of that. I mean, I still work out upper body and everything, but cutting off a lot of that weight and cutting about 20 pounds down just makes you a lot more efficient, in my opinion. There's a fine line between being skinny and but also having some strength too.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, I went from, being, in the military where I was in pretty good shape running. I hate to run. Getting out of the military and going from, 190 to 250, big old butt crack sticking out of the front of my shirt, jamming on Butterfingers and Mountain Dew, then going back, getting super, super fit, racing mountain bikes, and then going and roid raging and going up to, and I think I got up to like 270. I could bench press for over 500 pounds, but I couldn't walk across the street, and then dropping down from there and kind of finding that, that happy medium, like you just said, of strength, endurance, and everything else. And for me, right around 200 pounds is where I'm at, where I'm most efficient. I'm not hungry all the time. Last year I got Giardia. I got down to like 180 something. I only have weighed 180 since 7th grade, right? And I was burning out pretty quickly. And so you're going to find that there's, and that's one of the things he's pretty yoked, right? I mean, he's all piped up, and, those pipes takes oxygen, right? More muscle, more oxygen. And that fine line is where you'll find maybe you don't need 18-inch arms. Maybe 17 will do it, right? Or maybe 44-inch chest might be a little big. And if you're going to backpack hunt, you're definitely going to find that happy medium.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, that's some good stuff there. And one question I want to just circle back around real quick to the packs that someone had sent in about. Do you use a pack rain cover, or do you just use the bag for the most part?
Not very often, because I waterproof everything important that's inside the pack. Meaning like camera gear, electronics, or my, clothing or bag or whatever is in waterproof containers. Now, that's most of the time. If I'm going, no, I didn't bring a rain cover on the goat hunt. Oh, like Idaho, I will say, like when I was in North Idaho, I had a rain cover. The thing is with a pack rain cover, it's still going to eventually get inside the pack if it rains hard enough. They do help. I would suggest a pack cover to most people, and especially on a multi-day backpack hunt, to run like some type, whether it's Ziploc bags or whatever, to make sure that the important stuff is in waterproof containers in your bag. But the thing that's nice with a pack cover is, and this is is me being my backpack hunter self, is in an emergency, you can put deboned meat in there and put it in your pack, or put it between the pack and the frame, for example. If it's a big one, I mean, I've put deboned meat in there to lay it down. You know what I mean? If you're sleeping in a bivy and it's going to storm all night, definitely wrap that pack cover around your pack, totally enclose it. So, you get up in the morning, your pack's dry, right? That's important. So I would say a pack cover is definitely something to take into serious consideration. The shitty thing is you're hardly ever gonna use it. But, when you do need it, it is handy. And sometimes I've used mine. I mean, honestly, I've been especially in the high country, man, I've made that thing into a water filter or a water
catcher,
holder catcher. Yeah. And then, that drip hole, there's grommets in all of them for water to flow out, and funneled into an Nalgene, because water is at a premium at 13,000 feet. Let me tell you, I mean, I hate to sound like True Grit and LaBeef drinking water out of a fucking footprint, right? But I've sucked water out of rocks many, many times at high altitude and been happy to sound just like LaBeef if you watch that. Been happy to have it, right? I have been very happy to find a rock holding water. In fact, to a point, I started carrying a life straw in my survival kit so I could just suck it right out of there, especially on sheep and goat hunts. You're glassing and there's a rock full of water, probably going to have mosquito larvae in there, but that shit will buff out, man. I'll suck it right out of there if it keeps me from dropping 1,000 feet in elevation.
Yeah. I know that feeling. I sucked water out of an elk wallow last year, and even though it was clean after I ran it through the filter, it still tastes like elk piss, no matter which way you look at it.
Dude, I do get frustrated on social media. Brian, I think, posted a video of me and him getting water out of from a Nalgene bottle and then using the Sterapin. Mm-hmm. And guys, whatever, don't trust the Sterapin, and bring a filter. It's like, this isn't my first rodeo, right? Like, I have pumped water out of many elk wallows with a filter. That doesn't change shit. It still tastes horrible. I mean, you're drinking elk piss, basically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I called it Badussi, but you're drinking water that elk have pissed in, rolled around in. It's not the best case scenario, but you do what you've got to do. And it doesn't matter, man. I mean, even drink mix, it still tasted horrible. And I was sipping it 90 proof, man. Like, it was like, oh God, but I didn't get sick and I stayed hydrated. I mean, I wouldn't want to drink it every day, but no matter what, when you're getting water that way, there's no good way to get it. I mean, no matter what you do, it's going to taste like shit. But again,
does the Sterapin help that out at all? Does that help out the flavor? Or still the same?
No, fuck, it's fucking horrible, man. No, and then, I mean, I did I've told this story a lot, but whatever. I did a water filter purification Sterapin test, and that Sterapin was the only thing that worked every time, and that's why I still use it. But you are sticking, like Yoda, a lightsaber in your water, twisting it in circles, and you're thinking, is this shit really going to work? Like, does light kill what's going in my body? Like, am I going to get sick? Now, I have the utmost confidence in the Sterapin, and I use it all the time, and it kills it doesn't kill certain things. It scrambles its brain, in a very layman's way to put it, so you can't get Giardia.
Yeah.
But I just know that I haven't had the best of luck with filters in comparison, so I always use the Sterapin. But no, water still tastes like shit. Doesn't help at all.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, the amount of time that you spend out there. I'm sure I can understand why you went away from filters. I ran that Platypus inline filter the last 2 years, and both years I ruined the filters to the point where water wouldn't even go through it, even when you back flushed it and everything else. And that's why I listened to your podcast on the different filtration systems, and really I'm looking into trying out a Sterapin as well as any other. Just recently I've been just using Aquamira drops and finding some way to screen the water going through, but those inline filters seem to plug up so much, at least in my experience.
Well, and trying to convince people of that hey, it works until it doesn't is difficult, because you get real filthy water. you're in trouble. It's going to fill up, especially those hollow core fiber filters or whatever the hell they're called. You can you can get in trouble pretty quick with that. And so, but again, these are those, things where, you spend enough time back there. It's really not an arguable point. You know what works, you're comfortable with what works. And then you run with that. I'm not going to lie. If I was, back east heading west and some, fat dude was telling me, meaning me, to use a freaking pin that lights up to purify my water, I wouldn't believe me either. But it does work really well.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear. Like I said, I think it's kind of bullshit too. When I read it, on the label with the platypus there, it's like, oh, it's good for 10,000 gallons of water. Well, after about 30, it shit the bed when you get some granulars in there and everything else, and mud and everything else. And I don't care how much you try to back flush it, it never operates the same again. But
it's funny. I get people, when I've batched that thing, people will get on, I've used it for this long, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, well, what are you telling me for? If you like it, keep using it. I'm not a freaking car salesman for purification systems. I'm just telling you this works for me. If you're having luck with a basic gravity filter, who am I to say to stop? Rub some plunk on it, use that thing. I just know if I say that those work and then someone uses it and it plugs up, I get the nasty gram emails about it. You know what I mean? So I really focus on what I truly believe works and is not going to make someone's life miserable, on the side of a mountain. I focus on that.
Yeah. All right, Aron. Well, I think we covered all the things I wanted to. I mean, I could go into a lot more detail, but we're running close to 2 hours here, so I appreciate the time. Is there anything else that you think that you want to leave the listeners here from a tip standpoint? I don't know, anything you can think of off the top of your head that you may not think of.
Maybe not that they may not think of, but I would say that don't get overwhelmed if you're heading out west. Don't make it more difficult than it is. Don't get confused with stuff online. Don't get too freaked out about it. Look at it like you're driving from point A to point B, then you're going to walk from point A to point B, and you're going to go hunting. So don't wrap it up too much more. Just do your due diligence and research on gear. Try to get the best you can afford, get in the best shape you can. And not to sound, I hate to say Brian Collin, Donnie Vincent-ish, but you're out there to have fun. So don't let all the other stuff get in the way. Just go out and have fun. And if you're lucky enough, you'll get an animal, and that's a bonus. Don't get too wrapped up in everything else.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Aron. I appreciate all your input here, and we'll have to talk to you again soon. But first, where can people find a little bit more about you, Kifaru, and also Kifaru Cast?
So Kifaru Cast, just Kifaru Cast. You can find it on Podbean and Stitcher, iTunes. You can get on Kifaru.net's website. You can get it on there. You can anything Kifaru, Kifaru.net. Kifaru_INTL is our Instagram page. That's for Kifaru International. As far as me, it's ARON _Snyder is my Instagram page. And then I've got a couple of Facebook pages. One of them's full. My public figure page is just Aron Snyder, and it's with one A. And then, other than that, obviously, I'm big into photography, so a lot of it's just super cool photos I post up on there. And then, there's still stuff for me on the Gritty Bowman pod. I've been on a ton of different podcasts, and then obviously you can listen to me say goofy shit all the time on Kifaru Cast. We usually do 2 or 3 a week. Yeah,
yeah, they're very entertaining and real world as far as from a gear standpoint. I know when I'm going to listen to something about gear, I'm going to go there first if I want a real life opinion and not anything that's I guess bought. So
yeah, no, we don't take any money from anyone on Kifaru Cast, so we definitely, I'll have 4 camos on at one time just to be different when we're hunting, so I can speak intelligent about all of them. So yeah, we try to be as non-biased as we can.
Yeah, well, awesome, Aron. Again, thank you very much. And
thanks so
we'll
much for
soon.
listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.